Hey guys, Kid here of Burn 1 Shadowverse Evolved channel, bringing you another deck profile, this time on Natura Sword. This is probably the best deck in the format in my opinion. It's a lot of fun, it has a ton of consistency, along with a lot of potential burst damage if your opponent does not clear your board when you have a Bayleon on board. With that being said, let's just get right into the deck profile itself. Actually, before we get into the deck profile itself, if you like content like this and want to see more like it, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really motivates me to keep going. As I see the subscribe count go up and view count go up, it makes me more excited to make videos like this. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and yeah, just let's get into it. Alright, so here's the deck itself. This is the build I've been rigorously testing a lot and enjoying the most out of all the builds I've tried so far, so I'll just kind of get into it and explain it along the way. I mean, we're obviously Natura, so we're going to have to play the best one-drop Colorful Cook with the incremental healing, and as well as the extra discard Natura card to draw a card, adding more consistency to the deck. It's just a really powerful card in general. Once you start playing with it, you'll kind of feel how good it is. Next, Maid Leader is making a great return here. The deck revolves around a lot of the times just seeing Bayleon at some point in the game, especially before like turn 6 or 7. You want to be seeing that card to not only threaten a lot of burst damage out, but you also want to be able to essentially draw 2 every time you play a Bayleon. We do play only one Maid Leader Evo. We only really need to see the Maid Leader Evo once, and then after that, the extra Maid Leaders we draw will just get discarded to the trees to fill up our graveyard. But it's in there as a consistency tool because we need to see Bayleon, our boy here, the GOAT. Basically, this card is Alice, but infinitely better. I'll talk about it more once we get to him. But Maid Leader there is to add extra consistency to getting our Bayleon on 3 or 4 every turn, every game, essentially, because if the games we see Bayleon as soon as possible are the games we feel the most confident in. Next, Princess Strike, 3 of this is one of our few interaction tools that have quick. I think it's basically our only one. Card is insanely good. It's just a snipe that also randomly deals 6 damage later on once you play Mistolina onto the board, because Mistolina will let you cast this with its fanfare effect to deal 6 damage immediately. And then if you have multiple copies in your hand and there's a Mistolina on the board, now you can also threaten 6 damage for only 1 play point as a response on those turns. Tempered Aether is a love-hate relationship with this card. We just needed 2 extra 1-drops here. Essentially, this card feels super great because it does generate 2 trees. This is a really good turn 1 play as well if we don't see Colorful Cook, because it'll help generate more Natura cards onto the board for our Desert Pathfinder, essentially, and we can kind of abuse these trees later on as well. It's a really great tree generator, only playing it as a 2-of because it's probably one of the easiest cards to cut down to 2, since we don't always need to see it every game, but when we do see it, it doesn't feel horrible. Whereas, for example, Maid Leader, which might be a card people thinking of cutting first, like down to 2, I think is kind of a mistake in a sense, because we want to have the highest chance possible to see either Maid Leader or Bayleon in our opening hand or within like the first draw or 2 of the game, just to make sure that we can start going off and turboing through our deck. Next, Desert Pathfinder, once again another Natura staple. Card is insane. I don't think I really need to explain why it's so insane. It's just, look at that fanfare effect. Come into play, you get a generated tree, and then if you have 5 or more Natura cards on the field and /or in your EX area, you get a top check 3, add a Natura card from them to your hand, then put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. This is another card that lets you, 1, keep hand size up, and 2, it generates more value as the game goes on as well, which feels really, really good. It's insane how good this card is because it lets you turbo through your deck once again. And this is one of the few decks, I think, in the format you essentially get to see every card of your deck at some point. Lupine Axeman is a card that I was not 100% sold on, but literally after the first 2 games playing with this card, I realized this card is obnoxiously powerful. It generates a tree on play, and it can immediately answer a follower on the board, because you'll be able to push trees up and then have like a 2 to 3 trees on the board, be able to deal 3 damage to something, to remove something while still keeping a body on the board. It feels really good. It makes your opponent have to answer this card too, because this is one of the ways you can interact with your opponent's standing followers. It's actually really insane how much value you get out of this card, especially if your opponent doesn't clear it at some point. Then they have to, once again, you know, Lupine gets to go off with its ability or get to swing in for 2 damage, both good things. So Maisha here is my personal choice as a tech card here. Generally, if you don't like the whole Maisha game plan, just cut it from your deck immediately and just put in like 2 of the Tigress 3-drop that has Storm 4. It's a 4/3. If you have a tree on the board and tap it, you can easily put that in this slot instead. I personally like Maisha because I like it being as an alternate win condition for the deck. It feels really good. It also just being played out like on 2 is a body that has to be answered relatively quickly, because once you start getting like a Trail of Lights into the graveyard or more Purgation's Blades on into the graveyard, that means every time this card swings, it's a threat because it'll be able to draw a card or destroy a card, and then still swing in for the damage somewhere else. Card feels very good. I like it a lot. I know some people don't like the playstyle of Maisha in the deck because it does make some of your hands kind of cloggy in the sense, because sometimes you don't know, do I discard Maisha or not? Do I discard the spell or not when to my draw discards? It makes some of your hands awkward. Personally, I really like the card a lot. We only need one of the Evo, because when it does Evo, we get to pay 5 if it's that late in the game. It's essentially play this for 9 play points total on turn 9. Usually gets you there. There are games where I've played this on 9 and been able to swing in for 18 damage essentially from this effect, because I've already turboed through my entire deck to put as many followers into the graveyard while playing more of a control game plan instead of playing the tempo game plan the deck does provide. Octress, once again, is another powerful tech card that can be replaced with something else if you don't like it or you need room in your Evolve deck. But personally, I think this card is insanely powerful. It just wins games sometimes because once you get into the later stages of the game, this comes down, gets the Evo for free, becomes a 4/4. Get a steal a card from your opponent on the Evo side here, and then it makes things in your EX zone cost 2 less. And you know what else puts cards in your EX zone? Bayleon does, which means we'll be able to cheat out other things cheaper the longer this stays on the board. This is once again another card that requires to be demanded relatively quickly by your opponent. Otherwise, you'll get so much value out of it, they'll never be able to catch up. It's really fun also like stealing people's Death's Breath to bring back my Mistolina to destroy something and swing in for 7 damage again, or even more depending what's on the board. Card has felt insanely powerful and has definitely solidified its slot in the deck for me. But personally, I know some people don't like it, other people do love it. So this is once again another part of the deck that could be essentially cut, and you can put anything else you want here if you, for example, do need Evo slots in your Evo deck. Personally, I wouldn't cut it. I wouldn't recommend cutting it. I think it's just a card that should be in this deck every time. This meta has a lot of people drawing and discarding cards, which feels really good. Into the Abyss matchup, for example, you can steal their Alpha Drive from their graveyard, and then that's one less Alpha Drive you have to worry about throughout the game, or even still mono or something like that. Even it's pretty funny when that happens. Doesn't come up too often, but it is a play you can make. Outrunning the Encroaching Heat. So this is part of the whole Maisha package, so we can kind of cheat out Maisha early on. If so happens, we can use Outrunning the Encroaching Heat to give Maisha Storm without evolving it once we already have a Purgation's Blade in the graveyard, meaning that we can start swinging in and getting buffs on this card. So it'll come in mid game, it will swing in usually for around like 7-ish damage or so for 4 play points. Essentially, that's if you have the Purgation's Blade already in the graveyard, the spell that goes along with Maisha. And then it feels really, really good because it's just we're investing like 4 play points, essentially 6 to 7 damage in the mid game. And then late game, once again, it helps you cheat things in a certain way, like save play points essentially to play more things, or be able to pop a bunch of trees to fill up the graveyard and then play it to get the extra damage from Maisha and so forth. Card is probably super cloggy as well. Might recommend cutting this down to a 1 of, because a lot of times you don't really need it until, you know, later in the game sometimes. But it's more of like a happy accident in my opinion when you draw into this card and have something good to use it on. The biggest target obviously being Maisha, which is the best target, but sometimes you can target some other things to just find secret lethals that way, like Bayleon or even, you know, colorful cook or whatever you need. Just sometimes you just need that extra little push of damage and it's good enough. 3 Trail of Lights. We're playing Natura. We want to discard cards all the time. If we're discarding cards, Trail of Lights just a good card because we go up a card because of it. Really great card. You probably always play this as 3 of in this deck. If you play this as anything less, it's probably a mistake. It probably hurts your consistency a lot. Even later in the game when this is like a top deck card, that's still, you know, you can still play 1 play point to essentially draw a card, discard Trail of Light, and draw another card, making your trees basically draw 2s essentially, it feels like. Really good consistency card and value card throughout the game. Now our boy Bayleon, Sovereign of Light. This is the card that I think actually breaks this deck. Mistolina is a really powerful card, obviously, don't get me wrong, but I think Bayleon is the card that pushes this deck so far over the edge. We already know Alice and Fable was really powerful because of its effect, but now imagine if Alice had extra effects that were just generically good. So it's a 3/3 and it has a fanfare. It summons a tree token on the field or in your EX zone when you do play it. It has ward for some reason. I don't know why it has ward. And on its Evo side, it's essentially Alice once again. It's a 4/4, has ward still, but on Evolve top check 4, you can add up to 2 Natura cards from among them into your EX zone, then put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So you get extra value. This is really good into like Control Abyss. This is one of the reasons I think Control Abyss is kind of not as strong as it could be in this meta, because we have things like Bayleon running around that are tucking our cards away into the EX zone, meaning that our opponent, even though they discard our hand size down, they might not be hitting our key pieces because Mistolinas are in our EX zone instead of our hand, or extra Bayleons are in our EX zone instead of hand. Card is insane. Last effect, banish 2 cards named Naturan Great Tree from your field, and then you select the Natura follower and give it +2 attack. This comes up very often. A lot of times this is how we get rid of extra trees off the board. We can secretly pump up other cards or itself as well to swing in for extra damage. What's so crazy about this card is that it requires to be answered almost immediately, because a lot of times if it stays on the board, we're going to just slowly buff other cards and get extra chip damage in through it. A lot of times too, I will just go ahead and buff Bayleon itself and swing in if like they let it live. It gets pretty out of control very quickly when this happens. A lot of times too, like you push up 2 trees, you eat the 2 trees, then you push up more trees, eat those trees as well. It helps you clear out your trees very efficiently to turbo through your deck a little bit more, along with, you can buff itself, since it doesn't have to buff another follower, it just has to buff a Natura follower, and itself is a Natura follower, meaning that if it lives, like I said, you can eat a bunch of trees and suddenly you're swinging for 6, 8, or even 10 damage in like one swing, and it's obnoxious when that happens. Sometimes people just don't realize that's going to happen, and it does, and then they get kind of blown out because they had no answer to Bayleon on the board. This card is obnoxiously powerful. This is why we played as a 3 of on the Evo. This is why we play 3 of in the deck, and this is why we need to see it as soon as possible in all games, because it's just such huge value swings against our opponent. It's just too good of a card. I literally think this is the reason the deck is the best deck in the format. If this card didn't exist, I think this deck would still probably be tier 1, but it would not be as consistently powerful as I think it is currently. We play 3 King's Might. When I first played this deck, I was not 100% sold on this card. Yes, it can be, it can come out for free. And then I played 1 game with this card and I was like, oh my God, this card is broken as well. So the fact is, you're always going to have trees on the board. A lot of the times you're always minimum have 2 trees on the board, because you always want to set up for your Mistolinas coming out to be able to get the extra buff from having 2 trees on the board. So with that, and that being said, this card a lot of times only costs 1. This is a pay 1, deal 4 damage onto an enemy follower. But if you happen to also have a Bayleon on the board, it also costs 1 less, meaning this is a 0 cost. There are a lot of turns with Bayleon that makes Bayleon so obnoxiously powerful at controlling the board. Is like on turn 3, I could play this, use the Evo point to Evo on turn 3, find this off the top, answer their board, something on their board, and still have this 4/4 Bayleon on board without having to swing into something. It can also answer things that are standing, which is annoying. Yeah, this card is just really, really good. It's like once you play with it, you're just like, oh, why did they print this with Bayleon? Like, Bayleon didn't need extra support because it was itself already very powerful, and now we're giving it a card that it just pushes it way beyond like being an S tier card. Honestly, like Bayleon, I do think is really the problem of the deck. If I haven't said that enough, I think it's the best card in the deck because it has things like this supporting it on top of everything else in the deck helping it as well. Purgation's Blade is a card that it feels good. It's not always a thing you want to be playing, honestly, because a lot of times when you do play it, you kind of like waste the turn, essentially not developing the board or pushing damage. But we played in this deck because we played Maisha, and I like the Maisha package. I like having that alternate win con when you actually need it in some of the matchups. It feels good. I just like Maisha as a character as well. It's just a very good, powerful card. So we're forced to play Purgation's Blade. It's still a very good card nonetheless, even if it just destroys something. I've used it a few times to get through certain wards and then replay, and then being able to replay it essentially with our Maisha in the same turn, which is pretty fun. But other than that, it's just a really solid card that's obviously needed for the Maisha package. Once again, this is another slot. If you did cut Maisha from your deck. You get 4 slots essentially you can mess around with there. It's kind of, you got to make that decision. Do I play the Maisha package? Do I not? Personally, like I said, I prefer the Maisha package. Other people don't. You know, it just comes down to your playstyle and what your meta's like. If your meta's slower, the Maisha is probably better. But if you're dealing with things like mono and like aggro decks and things like that, Maisha probably isn't the best package to be playing. You're probably better off playing like the Tigers or something else to help control the board. Viridia Magna, another card too that is obnoxious. It's a very great control tool. Card is pretty rough though into certain matchups like Abyss, if once they start looping Gensetsu, because you know this card doesn't necessarily get destroyed unless your opponent has a 4 attack follower on the board that you can swing this into, and if they don't, this lives, which makes it kind of awkward sometimes when you actually want the Evo side out. But also other times it forces your opponent to do something. They clear the board during their turn, you get an Evo into the ward as well when that happens. So Rush, Estelle, Bane, obviously 3 insanely strong keywords. And then this last word effect too, you know, you can banish a tree token off the field. Then you put this card back on the board engaged, and then you evolve it into the Viridia Magna evolve side, which has 4/4 ward, and then last word you heal 2. It's just a really great stall card, a really good answer into certain things. But sometimes, you know, like I said, there are weird scenarios where you're still gonna have to play it and run it into something, and it's gonna live, so you won't be able to necessarily pop off into the 4/4 ward that turn. One thing to note too, to keep this in mind for ruling reasons, if your opponent plays Kawi and you play Viridia Magna and swing into it, you have to decide whether it's going to Evo before they decide what to destroy. So a lot of times you're going to be forced into the scenario of like, I run this in, I choose not to Evo, otherwise my opponent is going to heal 4 and you're going to heal 2. In some scenarios, you got to keep that in mind as well. If you need that heal 2 to survive next turn, it might be beneficial for you to pop the tree, Evo it, so they destroy it with the effect, because having an extra turn, a guaranteed extra turn to live, is more important sometimes than like not giving your opponent the value. So make sure to keep that in mind when playing this deck. And finally, the way the deck usually finishes most of its game, it's an obnoxiously powerful card, Mistolina, Forest Princess. This is a 6-drop for 6, but don't let the stat line fool you. It's actually a 7/6, like 99% of the time. So it has Storm, obviously, and then Fanfare. Select the Princess Strike in your cemetery and play it for 0 play points. You are forced to play this. Whenever you do play this, you can't choose not to play the Princess Strike. Unless there's no target, then obviously it fizzles. But if there's a target on the board, like Kawi, you got to keep that in mind, that if you play the Mistolina, you have to play the Princess Strike. If Kawi's the only card available on the board, you have to target it. It gets destroyed. They get to kill Mistolina. That's a really bad scenario to be in. Next, it has an activated effect where you tap 2 cards named Natura and Great Tree on the field, so 2 of your tree tokens. This follower gains +3 attack, and you heal 2. What's so great about this is that it's not once per turn, so if you have 4 trees on the board, you can tap 4 trees, get +6, swing in for 10, feels really good while also healing 4. Obnoxiously powerful. And then obviously if you eat your own trees and then push out more trees, you can do it, you know, 3 times or 4 times, or whatever amount of, you know, access to trees you have. Card is how we finish most of our games. It's such a great strong tempo card because we get to clear something big off our board because we're dealing 6 damage with the Princess Strike and then swinging in for 7. Then they have to answer our 7/6. If they don't, we get to swing in again, or potentially even buff it up again and heal 2 more. Card is once again another card that's like needs to be answered after being played, unless you're able to, you know, win the game against Sword before they get to untap essentially. So this is the deck itself. I really enjoyed this deck. I do think it's probably the best deck in the format right now. I don't want to say by a long shot, but I think it is much better than Forest. I do think it's much better than Mono. I think it's much better than Control Abyss. Any of the top tier decks right now, I think it has a very worst case scenario 50-50 matchup, if not a 55-45 matchup in my opinion. It's just that good of a deck. Its consistency is very good. The deck itself is just very powerful. I really highly recommend you try the deck. It's not everyone's playstyle. It's kind of boring in the sense if you don't have fun with like the control-y mid-range playstyle, and if you'd rather play something more burst damagey, something more combo-y, something like that, you might just end up playing Forest or a Mono Abyss, something like that. But if you like the whole mid-range control package of things, I think this is the deck for you. I like this deck a lot, and I won't be surprised when it tops a lot of events for this season. But yeah, with that being said, guys, if you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And then I'll see you guys in the next video. Later, everyone.